so our agenda for today, we're going to quickly go over templates. Then we're going to go over some onboarding use cases, particularly looking at kind of like the larger scale or for HR teams. So this is kind of a more structured, bigger way of doing onboarding than the kind of simple concepts we went over last week. We're going to look into dashboards for that and goals. And then we're also going to look at doing trainings and particularly focusing on tests and just checking that people are kind of intaking the information that we've laid out for them. And then at the end of the webinar, as always, we'll go into questions. Okay, so let's jump in. So this is my example workspace here. I've got a couple of spaces that I've set up for today. Cool. So first I want to talk about templates. So basically anything can be templated in ClickUp. You can template a whole space, a folder within that space, or a list within a folder. You can also template a task, a view, etc. So in order to kind of create a template that you want, basically all you have to do is create the space, folder, or list and tasks that you want. Once you've got it all the way you want, these three dots beside any level, you can click on them, go to Save as Template. You can give it a name, either save over an existing template or create a new one. Here I'll say New Template. And then you can choose who has access to this template. So for example, maybe you just want to save this for yourself. No one else will see it in their template list. Or you could show it to everyone, including guests, everyone not including guests, just admins, or just certain people. For now, I'll say everyone. You can also turn on public sharing if you would like to give access to this to someone outside of your workspace. Particularly useful if you're helping a friend set up or that sort of thing. Now this bottom section is quite interesting. This is what is included. So in this list that I have, we have a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't have to include all of it in this template. For example, I could say, actually, I don't want the assignees. A good one to often take off is watchers. You know, maybe certain people have been watching this, but they don't need to be watchers each time I use the new template. And you can even take off just about everything and then just kind of select one thing. I only want the, and we'll look at this later, I only want the subtask to be included. That wouldn't make too much sense in a list template, but it might make sense in a task template. For now, I'll click everything, and then we can go Save Template. Cool. That's the basics. If you do want to then use a template, you can go into Templates, which is, here you've got List from Template. In the easiest way for folders and lists is this plus button beside the space, and you've got templates there. And that will give you list templates and also folder templates. These are my personal existing ones. There's also a whole bunch from ClickUp that have been pre-made for you. Okay, now let's jump into onboarding and what that would look like for kind of a larger scale onboarding situation. So I've got a hierarchy here. It's in my HR space. And I've got a space for HR and then folders for all the different functions. So today I've built out the onboarding function, but you can see there's plenty of other things that HR might want to build out within here as well. For now, I've just got the single list, which is onboarding. But you could break this out into perhaps different departments if you do have enough onboarding happening that it's worthwhile kind of making divisions within it. Within that list, I've got a task for each person, and I've chosen to do it this way rather than a list for each person, just because it gives me easy reporting. So all of our dashboard reporting is based on lists. You can it's based on tasks for the calculations and graphs. We do have reporting on whole lists, and that's more of like a project style reporting. It's like, how complete is this list? And that could be useful in some cases, but in this case, I think I'd like to have some graphs and calculations. So I'm keeping things as tasks if possible, and then I'm breaking out kind of the individual events into subtasks. If you do have a very long or involved onboarding process, it may be better to have each person as a list instead. And in that case, I'd definitely suggest templating the list and just using the template each time you add a new person. Cool. So we've got activities and tasks as subtasks here. You can simply add as many as you like. Now, some of these might be for the person onboarding to do, or some of them might be for the trainer or whoever you have managing it to do. So for example, you might want to just assign this to an existing trainer and then assign the rest to the person onboarding. However works best for you. Cool. Now I've also made a view here with the subtasks visible. So I've made the subtask visible over here, subtask show, and I've set it to default to me mode. And I've called this one HR tasks. So basically what I'm getting at here is that any one of the HR team can come to this view and just see what's assigned to them. And particularly not just see the whole kind of people onboarding. You can see I have 3 people here who are assigned to me. I'm kind of responsible for their onboarding, but also the subtasks. So if we were to assign some of these subtasks, say this one is for me and also this one, then all of my subtasks that I need to complete will be here as well. So that can be quite useful. Cool. Now back to our all list. Within any one of these tasks or subtasks, we do have checklists, and you can have multiple checklists, each with a different name and a bunch of items. So this will typically be quite useful, particularly if people need to go through processes or kind of tick off things. It's not as useful for training. So for example, within one of these subtasks, I could have a whole bunch of content in here about, health and safety and what that means and yada, 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 and embed pictures and just lots of stuff. I can put a whole training content in here, or I can embed things. Whereas within checklist items, you could link to something, and that could be your training content, and they tick it off once it's done. But that's about it. You kind of can't do a long form content within there or embed things. So typically subtasks will be more useful, but checklists are definitely a really useful function to have for those simpler items that just need to be checked off. Cool. Now, what I really suggest, I think it's very, very helpful, is to, I've got one on Jim Shaw here, have some sort of, on the task itself, have an introduction and some instructions. So here I've said, welcome, we're glad to have you with us. This is the task, which lists out all the onboarding activities and training you'll be going through in the next 2 weeks. Tick them off as you progress through. You can also ask questions or clarification at any time in this task or the subtasks. That should be by writing a comment on the right and mentioning your trainer. So by training them to do this, they can put comments here, and their trainer is Shane. So I'll say, hey Shane, I've got a question about this, or what's the policy on XYZ? You can have a whole conversation over here. And that keeps it nice and kind of compartmentalized. You've got all the conversations here, but also the trainers can see, which task they're asking questions about. So they can instead ask a question on the subtask itself. And that way, your onboarding staff kind of know that they've constantly got a place to contact people. They have to go find where they're supposed to contact people. It's right here, right in the kind of inbuilt in their training. Okay, on the list itself, I've got a whole bunch of fields. So I've got assignee. In this case, it's who's responsible for this new person. You may or may not choose to use this. In this case, you might do, say, the head of the department they're going to be in, or you might have a set HR person that is going to work with them. I put the start date as when they kind of are joining the company, so their first day in the office or online or whatever it is. And I put the due date as when their onboarding should finish. So it's typically about 3 weeks after the start date in this case. I've got comments here just for easy access to those questions they've asked. So the trainer can come through, perhaps even go to me mode, see the people they're responsible for, and see what comments have been asked or said. I've got progress here, and progress automatically calculates how much of the sub items have been done. Sub items are subtask, checklists, and assigned comments. So that's perfect. It's the three things that we're likely to have. You could teach people to use assigned comments to ask trainers questions. We'll come back to that later. So that can just be useful to see approximately how far through their onboarding are they. And then because I'm doing this all in one list, I've got a drop-down field for the different departments, just so we can see, which department are they going to end up going into. For my statuses, I've simply got not started, onboarding, and complete. There may be more kind of stages in your workflow than that, but this is certainly a simple one. I've also got show closed off, just to hide everyone who's already completed their onboarding for simplicity. Cool. Now, these tasks, what I would suggest doing is once you've got all these, standardized events for new people, and it may not be standardized for everyone. You may have kind of some that are general for everyone, some that are kind of only your marketing department does them, some only new people to your engineering department does them. And what I'd suggest is you template this task. So you could do, an engineering one and save that. So we'll go into here and go save as template. And then you can do another one saved for the marketing, another one saved for et cetera, et cetera. Or what you could do is just save the general one. So it's kind of got the overall structure you want, and then just the general subtasks. Save that as a template, and then go in and save the specific marketing ones as a separate template. And what I would suggest there is you go in and save only the subtasks. Save template. So that means that when you load that template, instead of overriding everything, it'll just import the extra subtask for the marketing. So let's try that. I think I've got one saved already. General onboarding subtasks. So I'll click on that one, have a look through. If you click this use button, it'll import them straight away. But I want to, choose what's happening. You can see here it's only got subtasks, and we don't have due dates that we're importing, so it doesn't matter to remap. So I'll use that template, and you can see here it's pulled them in again, and now I've got duplicates because I actually already had that those subtasks beforehand. Cool. So then what your process would look like is you would say add a new task here, or you could load one immediately from the general template. Let's do it from down here. Let's say Fred Brown. Then we would load on the general template, wherever that one is. Let's just pick one here. Cool. And then we'll load on the one that is specific for their department. So in this case, we'll say general onboarding subtasks. Although you'd normally say, marketing or finance, whatever it is. And then you have all the appropriate subtasks for them ready to go. Awesome. Okay, next up, I wanted to talk about automation. So because we're going to be creating new tasks in here for new people quite a bit, that's a really good trigger to go off of. And we can actually get rid of that first step. So you can see when I created a new person, I had to apply a template twice. That was time consuming, I suppose. So what we can do is, because everyone's going to have that general template, we can do that automatically. So if I go into my automations here and add automation, I'm just going to skip to the custom automations. So I have to go searching in that list. And I'll say, in ClickUp, when a task is created, then I want to apply a template. This one here, and I'll select my general onboarding subtask template. You wouldn't use a subtask one, you'd use a whole one first. So this will kind of set everything you need except for the individual department subtasks. And that's it, create. So now when I go into create a new task, let's think of another name, Sarah Francis. Cool. And if I give this a second, boom, there we go. We have our subtasks. So that template has now been applied. So we no longer need to take that first step anymore. And in fact, we could even go a step further. So if we were to say, apply a department here, we could actually set up a automation to be based off of that. So we can say, okay, when a custom field changes, and we'll say, yep, the field is department, from anything, we don't care what it starts out as, but if it ends up as engineering, then we want to apply a different template. And this one I'd suggest only has subtasks, so it doesn't override the general setup that we have. So we'll select a template here. I'm just going to select this one again because it has only subtasks. But typically you'd select the engineering subtask template, whatever that is. Cool. And then we'll go create. So now when we choose engineering here, give it a second, we're going to see this number jump to 12. There we go. And so now we have our general and our engineering tasks on there. And all we need to do as a user is create the new task with the name and enter the department. If you want to make it even simpler, you could do that via a form view. Cool. So that is adding new people to our onboarding flow. Next, I want to look at dashboards for this flow specifically. So we'll go into dashboards here. I've got an onboarding dashboard set up. And now these are just some ideas. Really, dashboards are composed of all these widgets. They're kind of movable, resizable widgets. You can add more. You're certainly very free to do whatever you like yourself. But these are just, I think, some helpful ideas. So take what's useful, add more as you wish. So first up, I've got this portfolio widget. And this is the one that gives me the overview of the whole list. So I can see here the statuses that my various people are in. So I can see I've got 3 that haven't been started, 4 people are onboarding, and 1 is complete. So my total progress is 1 person out of 8 is finished onboarding, and someone's got an overdue task. If I want to see some other columns, they're over here as well, and I can add them. I think for my case, these aren't too useful. I do have a list color here. You may or may not choose to use this, but you could say, we're at risk, or things are looking good. You can change those names if you go into edit colors, what your names and colors available are. For now, I'll leave that blank. Okay, next up, I've got a task list widget. And all it's doing is pulling in tasks from the onboarding location. So it's just useful to see what's going on in that location. And you may just want to see, like here I'm seeing everything. You may just want to only see those in progress, or only those coming up next week. Whatever you prefer, it's just nice to see the detail. On the right here, I've got an activity view widget, and this is just showing one activity, which is comments. So anyone who has a comment on their task or subtask within this location, it'll pop up here. And this is just a good way to check that we're not missing anything. We do have a kind of a continuous feed of all comments. Down here, I've got a bar graph to show what stages things are in. So I can see who is complete, who has not started, who is onboarding. Now these are kind of out of order. That's a bug that we've been working on fixing. And I've also got our color coding here to see which department. So I can see where my engineers are, where my admins are, where my customer service people are. So it's just kind of useful to kind of keep an eye on the overall flow. If we start to have a lot and not started, we know we might have a busy week coming up soon. Then we're breaking it down. So we've got current onboarders by assignee. So out of the people who are currently being onboarded, how many are assigned to each people? This is nice and balanced. If it was perhaps unbalanced, we might look at reallocating things just to make sure workloads are reasonable. And then we can look at how many people we have coming into each department. So here we can see we've got 2 in customer service and admin, and only 1 in engineering. Now, I believe that will be because we're not showing closed tasks. So we did have 2 in engineering, but 1 of them is already finished. So as far as current onboarders, we've only got 1 current going into engineering. Okay, then we've got a who's behind table. Oops. Who's behind? And this just shows people who, within ClickUp, have uncleared notifications or overdue tasks. So it's just helpful to see if anyone might be getting a bit overwhelmed, probably needs some help. If people do have high numbers of uncleared notifications, we can reasonably assume that they're not seeing all of them, and that therefore they may be missing important information. So it's good to keep those down. Over here, I've got lots of calculation widgets that I've made small. just so that we can see some interesting information. So we've got a number of, I think this is actually total tasks and onboarding. I might turn that off. I'll turn off subtasks. So instead we just see the number of people currently onboarding. How many are going to be finishing late? So what that means, I've got a filter for overdue. So their expected finish date for onboarding, they've actually gone past that. And then we've got starting next week. So that's filtered for their start date is next week. So we can see, what's the workload coming up, how many new people are going to be coming in. In terms of tasks, we can see how many are overdue, how many have an assigned comment. So this is why you might choose to teach your onboarders to, instead of just mentioning you, actually assigning the comment to you, because then you can pull it into this calculation. May or may not be useful. See how you go. And then just, I'm not actually using priority in my workflow, but if you did want to use the priority flag for something, you could also pull that in. In terms of what can be done with this, you're mostly looking at data that can be calculated. So mostly here I'm just using task count, but you could do things off of a custom field if you prefer. And mostly I'm creating these by differing what the filter is, what's being counted in the task count. And there's lots of options for that, including custom fields. Cool. Now down here I've got this is I think it's get this right, cycle time. Yep. So we have cycle time and lead time widgets, and this just tells you how long it takes for a task to close after it's put in a active status. So in my case, let's go into the statuses here. So we've got not started as a not started status, onboarding as our active status, and closed as our complete status. So it's the amount of time from when it's put into onboarding to when it goes to complete. So if I were to, let's just close one of these and then go back into dashboards. Let's see if we can get that to update immediately. Yeah, there we go. So we can see the amount of time it took for those tasks to get closed. And that'll be kind of adjusted based on how many hours per day you have set in your settings. Then we've got stage size over time. So this is how many people are in each stage over time. So we can see that our not started group kind of started out at 0. It went to 3, 3, and then it's actually stayed at 3. But we've just seen that our complete jumped up by 1. So this kind of just allows you to know what the, percentages are of each group or each stage and how that's changed over time. So you might see kind of your onboarding group kind of do a big bubble, and then you know that you had a very busy time. Or if you see your not started group bubble, then you know that a busy time is coming up. So it's just useful to kind of keep an eye on how things are tracking over time, particularly if you're looking at staffing and future staffing needs, that sort of thing. Okay, cool. And this one's actually just a duplicate that I made back there. So we'll get rid of that one. Cool. So that's the ideas that I have for dashboard for you today. Actually, I will just look at the settings for this one, just so you can see how I've done it. So I have used the cumulative flow widget, which is a sprint widget, using the onboarding list. And I'm just showing this week by days. That's about it, really. Yep. Cool. Okay, next thing I wanted to briefly touch on, and this may or may not be useful depending on your situation, but I wanted to show you chat views. So chat views exist on a location, so a list, a folder, or a space. So in this case, I'm going to put it on my onboarding list, and this will just allow conversation. And so because it's on the list, all of my onboarding people will have access to it. So it might be a good place for them to kind of discuss things between each other, just to kind of minimize the amount of work for the HR team and kind of start to build a sense of community. There's various benefits of doing that. So, someone might say, has anyone already done this task? And they might, mention the particular task that they wanted to talk about. Cool. You can obviously use this internally as well, in your HR space, et cetera, et cetera. But just in terms of either allowing people to talk to each other who are onboarding, or you might have this be a place where people can ask the trainers questions. And because it's public, it kind of means you're answering the question once and all the onboarders will see it. Or you could make multiple chat views and kind of divide it out by topic. So, this one could be about, health and safety questions, or however you want to divide it up. If you need separate conversations, you can have separate chat views. All right, and then lastly for onboarding, I wanted to take you into goals. So goals is kind of our feature to track and kind of discuss KPIs or whatever kind of targets you want to set for your staff. So I've got an onboarding folder here. Within my onboarding folder, I have a goal for each person. So if I go into Anthony's goals, he has 2 targets, and this can be really anything. It's just a place to update your metrics and then perhaps discuss them with your direct report or whoever. And it's just a way of kind of keeping an eye on things, keeping things in consciousness. So the first one is just a target called first week. Oftentimes when you come to a company, your first goal is just to kind of make it through the first week and do all the things that need to do. So here I've linked 5 different tasks, and as these get complete, it will automatically update this target. So if I go into one here, company policies, we'll mark that as done. And we can now see, I've got 1 out of 5 done, which is a 10% of the total target. And then I've got a first project, which might be whatever this means for their department, the first thing they could actually kind of jump into. And then over time, this can adapt and change, and it might be, weekly goals or monthly goals that they set for themselves or set with their manager ongoingly. But in terms of just kind of getting people through onboarding, can be useful to give them some kind of milestones, kind of goals to try and reach. So that can be useful. Yeah. Once they are finished onboarding, you can maybe move their goal into another folder, or they can just make new goals every month or so, whatever works best. Okay, a few little tips and tricks here. So one thing that I haven't really talked about for these subtasks, but that might be useful, is setting start and due dates. So if you do have a certain kind of cadence or timing that you expect people to go through the onboarding, you can set start and due dates here. And those can also be saved and remapped in the templates. So you can kind of set it once and then have that reused each time. I believe that's correct. Let me know if I'm wrong about that. I sometimes get confused with the different functions with recurring. With recurring tasks, it's slightly harder to do this for subtasks, but I believe it works quite well for templates, which is what you'll need in this case. Cool. So yeah, that's really good for keeping things moving and setting expectations. Next up, creating personal folders. So here I've just created a space for it, as you've got each person has their own folder. You could instead have personal folders within the department space. If you're an HR personnel, you might have a folder in there. Personally, I think that kind of clutters things up a little bit, but I do just recommend this mostly for psychological safety. People have an area that's theirs. They can kind of, write down their tasks however they want. They probably don't have to keep it too tidy, and they can experiment with ClickUp if they're new to it, just to test things out and see how it works. It can just be really great for people to feel comfortable onboarding into ClickUp and also onboarding into your company. So I think that's a very helpful idea. And like at ClickUp, we keep all these public. It's not designed for you to have non-work related stuff in there, but it's just a place where you can have your own stuff organized your own way. Cool. And then last one is individual docs. So you could do this. You could set up a new doc for each new staff member and just say, hey, this is a great place where you could take notes and maybe start building your own processes. Obviously, there are company processes, but people tend to, get into their own groove and their own way of doing things. And by encouraging them to kind of write that down, they'll help remember it quicker. So it can be useful for getting people up and running a little bit faster. Very optional. If you want to do that, you can then share that doc, perhaps just with you and them, if you're making it for them, or you can, if you're getting them to do it, they can create it and just make it private to themselves. Awesome. Okay, that is our onboarding section. I'm now going to jump into the training section. Okay, so mostly what I'm focusing on here is kind of creating bigger courses and then kind of administering them and doing tests on them to kind of, as quickly and functionally as possible, check people's progress on a slightly larger scale. Okay, so my hierarchy here is I've got a space and then I've got a folder for each of my training courses. So I've got a workspace health and safety course. I've got our company visions and values that everyone needs to know about. And then I've got a project management training. Within this training, or this folder, I've got one or multiple lists for content. So you might break it down into kind of chapters or kind of big chunks if it is a long training. Within those, I've got tasks that have content in them. So you can paste all of your text here. And you can also have, we went over this in the beginning webinar, embeds, links, pictures, whatever you need to get the learning across. You can also break them into subtasks if you do want to kind of break out the topics here. So here I've got part one overview, and then the different chunks of that as subtasks. Cool. Then I've got a couple of lists, and each one of these is one of my tests. So each test has a form, and the answers to the form will create tasks in here. So you can see I've got a few that have been taken here, and their answers. Okay, we'll jump into that in a minute. So first of all, in terms of the content, there's kind of two ways of doing this. One is to template this, as we saw before, and create a copy for each person. Perhaps in their personal folder would be a good place. Or you could just have another folder or space for that. And what that means is it's highly interactive. So they can go in, they can, make changes on the content, highlight the content, do whatever they want. They can kind of adjust it because it is templated, so they can kind of mess it up if they want. That's fine. The other option is to make it read-only. So the way you do that is you go into the sharing and permissions here, and then go to permissions and say all can view. So it sets everyone to can view except for yourself. And that way people can come in, they can see it, they can learn the content, but they can't actually change anything. And then they'll go into the forms. Now I'd suggest the form link here. I'd suggest you actually put this in a task. So you might have, test one. And then in here, you would paste that. You could also do it as a embedded view. Sometimes people like to do that, but it might be just as simple to have it here. That way people can kind of get to it in the right part of the overall learning flow. Cool. So they read everything as they need, read only, then go to the forms. Forms open in a separate tab. So you can see it here, and then fill that out. We'll jump into the forms in just a second. Cool. All right, yep. So tasks or subtasks with content. Yeah. Okay, now let's jump into quizzes. So quizzes or tests, basically what we're hoping to do here is test people on the content that they've been going through. And just check that they're kind of learning it, understanding it, or maybe we have a certification we need to check off, that we've made and it, made sure that they know what we are suggesting they know. Okay. So first way is just to individually review things. So in this case, we might be templating it. You might have, a test task, or maybe like on every single task, you might have something, say like a checklist, where it's a bunch of questions. And it might be like true or false. And you just go, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and tick them all off. Or you might have, longer form questions. And I'd probably put these in the descriptions, although you could put it as a checklist and you check it off as they've answered it. But then you'd ask them to write out that answer in the comments. And they could even tag or mention their trainer, and then write the long form answers. And then the trainer can come in, and you might want to add a custom field for correct or incorrect, or you might build that into the statuses. Those are the two options. So in the individual review type situation, you're basically just having them do work on each task, and then the reviewer comes in and checks it, which can be kind of high work for the reviewer. But if it is quite an in-depth type topic and it needs that kind of level of checking, that might be the best option. In that case, I would suggest templating this so that people can write comments and have a personal list. You don't want people kind of working off the same list, or else they'll see each other's answers. Kind of ruins the point a bit. Okay, or the other option is to do it via forms, is the easiest option. So this is when you're kind of wanting to check things a bit faster. Maybe the answers are always the same, maybe the answer is a little bit simpler. So in this case, I would have them get to their test one, they open the form, and in the form, they'd put in their name. Let's say Brian, and you could add their email if you wish. If it's internal, actually, I guess we should say full name, Brian Stokes. And if you need their email, there's an email field. So we can say, and if they try and do something that is incorrect, they'll say, hey, this is not an email address. It does have to be an email address that's put in. Cool. And there's a whole bunch of different types of questions. So the first one is multiple choice. Now you see I've only got, I've got these named options here. Those will come into play later, but we don't need those. So actually let's get rid of those for now. I'll show you what the form view looks like on the back end. So here I've got my test one results. This is where the answers will come, and I've got my form. So my form can have a picture at the top, a name, a description, and then I've got all of my questions. So I'm using the task name as their name. So what that means is when the answer comes in, their name will be here, the task name. Then I've got an email custom field, and I've got a multiple choice question, which is a drop-down custom field. And so I can change that name. Let's actually get rid of all of these. And the options are based on the what I've set up for the custom field. Then I've got select a multiple question, and this is labels. So in our, if we refresh this, in our multiple choice question, we can see the various options, and I can choose one. With our labels question, I can select multiple. So I can select A, C, and D. Then we've got a date question. This allows me to select a date, a yes or no. A key thing here is that this must not be required. So if you make this required, they have to check it, which is useful for if you need people to agree to something in order to complete the form. But in this case, I want them to be able to submit yes or no because it's more of a logic check. Next up, we have a short response question. So here they can enter text, but they can't go to a new line. So it's just kind of one line. If it does get really, really long, then it will just kind of go sideways. But the general incentive here is to not put too much text in there. Whereas in contrast to that, I then have a long response question. And this one, they can say as many lines as they want and just kind of keep going. So this can be good for anything that's longer form. Next up, I've got a number, and this will say, it's only for numbers, so they do have to enter numbers. And then lastly, a rating question. And you can use emojis here, so you can make this, a bit of fun, lighten things up a little bit, or you can just have a very serious kind of, here I've just got blue circles. Cool, and that's about it. So next up, I want to show you these list options. You may or may not use these. This just shows where the list is saved to. If someone will be assigned to it automatically. So say if you always have one reviewer for this test, you just have them automatically be assigned. whether it should use a template. In this case, I'm not going to use a template, and whether the user should get redirected after filling the form. Some of these options, in fact, maybe most of them even, might be on the business plan. So just do be aware of the plans that you're on. And we can have a light theme or a dark theme for the form itself. Colors, if you have a certain brand color, whether or not the ClickUp branding appears down the bottom. And then this is the really useful one, add all answers to the task description. So let's submit our answers there. We'll see that pop up as a new task in this list view. So if I open it, not only do I have all my answers in custom fields there, but I've also got them all laid out in the description, which can be useful, especially if you're doing integrations and things. Cool. So now in terms of checking these, what we might do is you might have a new task that's like correct answers. And in this case, you would lock this list so that people can't just come in here and look at it. They will obviously still have access to the form, even if this list is locked. It just means they can't see the actual answers. In fact, I'd pretty much suggest that regardless. So just they can't see other people's answers. So let's go in there and make this private. And you just add the reviewers. So I'll do the same thing with this one, sharing and permissions, and make private. Okay, we are getting a little bit low on time here, so I'm just going to keep going fairly quickly. And so you can have your correct answers in here and just kind of match them up. And you might create another drop-down custom field to say, pass or fail, etc. Okay. Now I want to take you through another option here that's a little bit more advanced. Okay, so what you could do instead of manually kind of checking these and marking them off is you could create an automation. So now when the form is filled out, it's going to create a new task. So we'll make our trigger task created, and then we'll add some conditions. So we'll say, okay, the correct answer for this multiple choice question is 1. And the correct answer for this thing is, let's say any of, let's say all of these 2 options. And the correct answer for this date question is this, etc., etc. And so you can add as many conditions as you need. And then basically what it's saying is if a task is created and all the answers are correct, then do something. Now it might be you leave a comment, it might be you assign someone. Good chance you'd do it, say, set a custom field. Here we go. And you might create a new custom field that says, pass or fail, whatever. Make a drop down, and then you can set the value of that. So that's one way of marking it. If you do have people that have not gotten all the correct answers, then you could create an automation. Same thing. Task is created, but you just add one condition. So you say, okay, this answer is not equal to the correct thing, and then the action for that. You would have to make one for each question, just because these are naturally ands. So you want to say, trigger if this is not correct, and then separately trigger if the next question is not correct, etc. So that is a cool option to kind of automate the marking. The downside of that, the upside of it is it's completely automated. Downside is you kind of need everything to all be correct. You're looking for 100%. If you're looking for like 80% correct, and it doesn't matter which questions are wrong, that method is going to be harder to use. And what I would instead suggest is using a formula field. Now, formula fields have a current limitation that they can only take in numeric custom fields. So here I've got a numeric dropdown, a number custom field, and a currency custom field, and these can all be used. So if you're able to set up your test in such a way that all the answers are numeric, and so this is where you might put in that those options. So you say, okay, 1 means this, 2 means this, 3 means this, 4 means this, etc. You might do that in the question name or in the description itself. So you can have like question 1 options, and then question 2 options, etc. And this is, by the way, this is just me kind of going on a tangent with some stuff that I think is really cool. It's not, as you can see, doesn't look that pretty. It's not really designed for this, but I do think it's very, very neat, and that might be worth it to some people to go ahead with it. But if this is all kind of feeling annoying to you, skip it. Like there's no need to do this, purely optional. But I'll go through it quickly just for those people that might help. Okay, let's have a quick look at this form. So, okay, you see your name, Ryan Stokes. Okay, the correct answer is orange. Okay, the answer to this question is, let's say, 5, and the correct answer for this question is $60. Great, submit. We'll see that pop up here. And we've got our various answers, and then we have a result. And this result is a spreadsheet style formula that kind of calculates it. So what I've got is I've got an if function that says if all of this is correct, then say correct. If that is not correct, then say incorrect. And what our conditions are is that we have an and function. So we say that the numeric multi-choice question equals 2, and the free entry equals 6, and the currency equals 60. So I was $1 off, or 1 off in this this answer. So I got it correct. So I got an incorrect. Then we have so that's one option. But that's kind of the same thing where all of them need to be correct in order for it to pass. So here we have 2, 6, and $60, and they were correct. Then we've got another option here, which is the same kind of thing, but just set up differently. So in this case, I'm saying, if currency equals 60, then 1, otherwise 0. If numeric field entry equals 6, then 1, otherwise 0. And if the multi-choice equals 2, then 1, otherwise 0. So if that's all correct, this is going to say 1, 1, 0, and then I'm summing them. So I'm adding them all together. So I'm going to end up with a number that is how many answers were correct. And if the answers that were correct is greater than 2, say pass, otherwise say fail. So now in this case, I should be seeing pass here. I've probably done something wrong with this formula. So it is a bit trickier. You do want to be somewhat familiar with formulas if you do want to go down this route, but it is certainly very useful. In this case, you can't base automation off these, so you would just have to look through and go, okay, great, that's a pass, mark it as a pass, that's a fail, all right, this one's a fail, mark it as a fail. So there would still be a manual step, but it's pretty simple. So if that's useful, use it. If that was all complicated and annoying, skip it, ignore it, don't worry about it. Okay, and then we've got a few minutes left, so last thing I want to show you is dashboards. So for this, I've made an individual dashboard per training. So this dashboard is just for my project management training. And we can see here, I've got a few widgets. And I want this one actually to go up the top. We're going to change how this works because sometimes it's just a little bit irritating. If something, gets changed. All right. So what I've got up the top here is I've got the tests that were passed this week and the tests that were failed this week. Now there might be actions that need to be taken based on that. So maybe the past ones, maybe they need to be contacted, moved on to the next step. The failed ones, maybe we need to work with them, figure out why that happened and make sure they're set up to try again. Results over time, this kind of just gives us a graph of how many people are passing and failing, just so we can kind of check on the total status and how this test is going. If we're getting really high failure rates, we might need to look at either what's happening with the test. Is it kind of badly worded, or is our training content not good enough? What's the deal? And same thing, we've got that again percentage-wise over here. And then down the bottom, we're drilling into the individual questions to see what the success is with each question. So at the left here, we've got our total number of tests that were taken. In this case, it's 3. We can see for question 1, because question 1 was a multi-choice, we can actually graph it, which is lovely. So we can say for question 1, 33% of people got a 3, and 66% of people said 2. And in this case, 66% was the correct answer. So that's great. For questions 2 and 3, because they were number and currency fields, there's kind of like a free entry. So we can't graph it the same. But what we can do is put in a filter that says numeric free entry equals 6 or does not equal 6. So true or false. So we can see we got 2 people got it correct and 1 person got it incorrect. And question 3, 3 people got it correct. And this filter is set up incorrectly, it looks like. This needs to be does not equal. not equal to 60. So 3 people got it correct and no one got it incorrect, which is great. So yeah, that's a bit of an idea of overviewing just the outcomes of a test to kind of check its health and progress. Okay, that's it for content for today. I do want to jump into questions. It does look like lots of questions have gotten answered by the team, but if you do have more questions based on this, chuck them into the question and answer section now, and we can go through a few before the end of the webinar. Okay, so Zach asks, will dashboard charts be able to incorporate the task's actual name into its data rather than the status? Same question for start and due dates. So it depends what you mean by this. So in terms of showing individual task details, that's kind of not the point of charts. You can definitely get that in the task list. That being said, let me just pull up a bar chart. Start and due dates. So dates particularly are a bit different. They're quite a complex data point. You can pull in date custom fields. I think currently you can't pull in start and due dates. But because we have date custom fields, if that was a feature request you wanted to make, that would potentially seem reasonable. If you're meaning kind of like, click on the graph and then pop up the tasks that make up that section, that's a great idea. I love that. I've certainly heard that suggested before. It's not something we've had time to get to yet, but that's a great feature request. Can you embed photos into questions on forms? Not yet, not into questions. So you can definitely embed photos and pictures into tasks, but forms, kind of all you've really got currently is this, this text name. So in the future, we're hoping to add like a text block like these, so you can put those, in between questions, and that's something we might be able to embed photos there. So yeah, totally agree. I would also love that. That would be really neat. Okay, looks like we're through our questions there for today. If you do have any other questions, do chuck them in now. Otherwise, thank you for coming. It's been, hopefully you've gotten a lot of benefit out of this. If you do have any further questions later on, you can always connect with us through the help button here and connect with ClickUp and just let us know kind of what you need, what you have questions about. And otherwise, I hope to see you in a future webinar. Marie, you've asked a couple of questions there. Unfortunately, I don't speak that language. Okay, you've translated it here. Great. Can we make notifications by email? Yes. So if you have, So in your notification settings here, you can choose what emails to get for what kind of events. So, you have things changing in comments, like new comments, things changing in tasks, start dates, due dates, other things that happen. You can choose which of these you get emails about. So that's our email function for notifications. If the task is overdue, okay, yep, specifically that, that will come under the due date ones. So you'd say after overdue, and then how far overdue. So you could just say 5 minutes or, several days. So yep, you can definitely get an email about that. Awesome. All right, well, everyone, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.